Lennox had always been a quiet observer, especially in grand rooms filled with grandeur. The banquet hall of the Galactic Council was just the sort of place where he preferred to blend into the background. People from all over the galaxy gathered in their finest attire, laughing, shaking hands, and exchanging pleasantries. Human diplomats like him were expected to act professionally, but Lennox wasn't particularly interested in the political games being played around him. The dinner had started with all the fanfare one could imagine. Waiters moved around the room, serving elegant dishes from all corners of the galaxy. Every guest seemed to be engaged in their own conversations, discussing everything from trade agreements to peace treaties. To Lennox, it felt like just another political event, where he'd have to nod politely and pretend to be interested. He wasn't one to enjoy these events. He had always been more at home fixing machines or solving problems that made sense. Things he could control, but as a diplomat he had his duties. And tonight his duty was to observe, stay silent, and not make waves. He leaned against the back wall of the room, watching the others. He was lost in thought, trying to mentally piece together the complex negotiations he had been involved in earlier. His mind wandered to the recent tasks and the frustrations that came with trying to get everything right. It had been a long journey, and the galaxy's politics seemed as convoluted as the machine parts he'd often worked on. As he stood there, not really paying attention to anything in particular, a soft voice interrupted his thoughts. "So, you like my body, human?" Lennox blinked, his attention snapping from his thoughts back to the present. He hadn't expected anyone to address him, let alone someone so striking. Standing in front of him was an alien woman. Her skin shimmered with a deep shade of violet that seemed to catch the light with every movement. Her eyes, large and luminous, stared directly at him. The intensity in her gaze sent a shiver down his spine. She had a graceful yet powerful presence that made her stand out among the other guests. Her clothing was simple yet elegant, highlighting her otherworldly beauty. Lennox felt the blood rush to his face. He hadn't meant to stare, but she had caught him at just the wrong moment. He fumbled for words, unsure of how to respond. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to... I didn't... He started to stammer, feeling awkward. The woman smiled, the kind of smile that suggested she found his flustered state amusing. It's okay, human, she said with a light laugh. You weren't the first to look. I just wanted to see if you would be honest. Lennox was still caught off guard. I wasn't... I didn't mean anything by it, he said, his voice trailing off, realizing how foolish he must have sounded. She tilted her head slightly, her smile still present, but now tinged with something else. Curiosity, or perhaps amusement. Lennox couldn't tell. I'm Ithra, she introduced herself, emissary of the Zyran people. Lennox, he replied, still feeling a little awkward. The brief introduction didn't seem to do much to ease his nervousness. The silence between them stretched for a moment, filled only by the soft murmur of conversations around them. She wasn't pressing him for an answer, but the weight of her question hung in the air like a challenge. I'm not used to humans staring, she said, her voice still light, though there was an edge to it now. Usually, you all try so hard to hide your curiosity. Lennox wasn't sure what to say. Part of him was still stunned by the directness of her question. In his experience, people didn't talk so openly about these things. His people, at least, didn't. It's just, I've never seen anyone like you, he finally admitted. You're different. Different, she repeated thoughtfully, as though the word itself was something she was still trying to understand. Yes, I suppose we are. My people have long been observers, watching the different species that inhabit this galaxy. We rarely show ourselves, except when it's necessary. Lennox couldn't help but wonder about her. Her species, the Zyrans, were well known, but remained largely enigmatic to the human race. They had always kept to themselves, maintaining a distance from the other civilizations in the galaxy. But here she was, speaking to him as though they were equals, not strangers from different worlds. "What is it you want from me?" Lennox asked, his curiosity now getting the better of him. Ithra's eyes gleamed as she tilted her head again. "Not much, just your honesty." Lennox frowned, confused. "Honesty?" "Yes," she said. "Tell me, human, when you look at me, do you see just my body? Or do you see something more? I'm curious how your kind perceives us." The question caught him off guard again. It wasn't what he had expected to hear. I'm not sure I understand," he stammered. Ithra's gaze softened, and she placed a hand on the side of her face, as if to gesture to herself. "I am more than just my appearance. So, I ask you, do you look deeper, or are you just intrigued by my form?" Lennox wasn't used to being asked questions like this, but something in her voice made him stop and think. He didn't just see her physical appearance. He was fascinated by her presence, by the air of mystery that surrounded her. But there was more to it. There was an intelligence, a weight to her words that suggested she was not someone to be underestimated. "I don't just see your body," he said, his voice steadying as he spoke.
"I see someone who is here for a reason. Someone who has a purpose."
She seemed to consider his words for a moment before nodding slowly. "A purpose. Yes. Perhaps we are more alike than I thought." Lennox felt the weight of her words. She wasn't just any alien emissary. She was someone who understood the complexity of what it meant to interact with other species, and for some reason, she had chosen him to engage with. The idea that he might be more than just a diplomat in her eyes was both flattering and unsettling. He didn't know what to make of it, but he was sure of one thing. This was not going to be an ordinary night. The encounter with Ithra would change everything. Lennox still wasn't sure what to make of Ithra. Her presence was so different from anyone he had ever encountered. It wasn't just her appearance, though her glowing violet skin and striking eyes were unlike anything he had ever seen. It was the way she spoke, her confidence, and the challenge in her words. She didn't seem like any other diplomat or ambassador. There was something deeper about her, something that set her apart. They stood there in the middle of the grand banquet hall, surrounded by conversations and laughter, but to Lennox it felt like the entire room had faded away. It was just him and her now, and the conversation they were having felt important, though he couldn't yet understand why. "So tell me more about your people," Lennox said, trying to steer the conversation into safer waters. He wasn't sure if he wanted to keep talking about his reaction to her appearance. He had never been good with words when it came to feelings. His interest in her was undeniable, but there was something about her that made him feel as though he had to tread carefully. Ithra seemed pleased by his question. Her eyes softened slightly, but the same calculating look still lingered in them. "The Zyrans are an ancient species," she began. "We've been watching the galaxy for millennia, observing the rise and fall of civilizations. Our people are as old as the stars themselves, and we've seen more than you can imagine." Lennox nodded, fascinated. "And yet you keep to yourselves?" "Yes," she replied simply, her tone matter-of-fact. "Our history has taught us that it's better to remain distant, involved, but not entangled. The chaos of intergalactic politics is not something we wish to be a part of. We've learned that peace often comes at a great cost." There was something in her voice, something that hinted at regret, maybe even sadness. Lennox didn't know if it was just her species' natural way of speaking, or if it was something more personal, but he decided not to press further on that. Instead, he continued, "So why now? Why are you here, engaging with us?" Ithra paused, her gaze shifting toward the large windows at the far end of the hall, where the stars of distant galaxies twinkled in the black void of space. "Our people are changing," she said softly. "We can no longer remain detached. The galaxy is shifting. The conflicts are growing. And our species, we've always watched, but now we need to act." Lennox's curiosity deepened. So what exactly is it that you want from us, the humans? Ithra's eyes returned to his, a glint of something unreadable in them. It's not just about what we want from you. It's what we can offer. You see, human civilization is young. You're still figuring out your place in this vast galaxy. We've seen countless species like yours, energetic, full of potential, but often reckless, easily swayed by emotion or politics. But you're resilient. You adapt. You evolve quickly. That's why we're here, Lennox. We want to guide you, not control you, but help you avoid the mistakes we've made. Lennox felt a mixture of pride and skepticism. He had always known that humans were considered the newcomers to the galactic stage. Other species saw them as wild, unpredictable, but full of promise. Still, the idea of an ancient species offering guidance was strange, especially from someone like Ithra, who was clearly powerful and confident in ways he couldn't quite comprehend. I don't know if humans need guidance, Lennox said cautiously. We've managed so far and, well, we're not always good at following orders. We're more of the do it our way or not at all type. Ithra's lips curled into a smile. Oh, I'm well aware of your independence. But that's why we're interested in you. You don't follow anyone's path but your own. And in the end, that may be what makes you so dangerous, but also so remarkable. Lennox raised an eyebrow. Dangerous, yes? She said, her voice serious now. The way your species reacts, the speed with which you adapt to new situations, it's unpredictable. Other species play the long game. They wait, they plan, they calculate every move. But you humans? You act on impulse. You dive into the unknown, and sometimes that works out. And sometimes it doesn't. But when it does, you can achieve things no one expected. Lennox thought about her words for a moment. She was right in some ways. Humanity had always been unpredictable, capable of great things but also prone to mistakes. The galaxy had watched them rise from a small, divided species to a growing power. But that growth was messy, full of war, politics, and misunderstandings. I guess that's what makes us human, Lennox said with a half-smile. We're not always perfect. But we try. Ithra gave a nod as if she understood exactly what he meant. Yes, and that's why we're watching you closely. We want to see where you go next. And perhaps we'll be there to offer guidance when the time is right. For a moment there was a silence between them, one that wasn't uncomfortable but rather filled with the weight of everything they had shared. Lennox felt as though he had just had a conversation that could change the course of history, and yet he wasn't sure how to respond. What could he say to that? To someone so ancient, so full of knowledge and power? But Ithra wasn't finished yet. You're here tonight, not just because you're a diplomat. You're here because you're human. And right now, the galaxy is watching you. Lennox felt the air shift around him. The weight of her words hit him like a ton of bricks. He had known that humans were being observed by the greater galactic community, but hearing it from Ithra made it feel real. He wasn't just some diplomat in a suit. He was part of something much bigger. I'm not sure I understand, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. Ithra's smile returned, though it was tinged with something mysterious. That's all right. You will. In time. But for now, consider this a test. We're not here to make demands. We're here to offer you a choice. You have the potential to shape the future. And if you succeed, if humanity succeeds, you might just change the galaxy. But first, you need to prove it. Prove it how? Lennox asked, his voice cautious. Ithra's eyes gleamed with an intensity he hadn't expected. By making the right choices. By seeing beyond the surface. And by understanding that, sometimes, the greatest challenges don't come from external forces. They come from within. Was she talking about the challenges humanity faced? Or something more personal? He wasn't sure, but something in the way she said it made him feel that he was standing on the edge of something much larger than he had ever imagined. I'll try, he said finally, unsure if that was what she wanted to hear, but it felt like the right answer. Ithra gave a slight nod, her expression softening. That's all I ask. The two of them stood there for a moment, the hum of the banquet continuing around them, but Lennox couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to change forever. He didn't know what Ithra wanted or what she expected from him, but one thing was certain. He was no longer just a human diplomat. He was part of something much bigger now, something that could change everything. And as Ithra turned away to speak with another guest, Lennox couldn't help but feel that this night had only just begun. The following days after the banquet felt different. Lennox couldn't quite put his finger on it, but something had changed. Ithra's words had lingered in his mind, playing over and over in his thoughts like a melody he couldn't shake. You have the potential to shape the future. Those words echoed in his head as he went through the motions of his daily duties. He found himself paying more attention to the small details, noticing things he had overlooked before. People's expressions, the way they spoke, the subtle shifts in their body language. It was as if his whole perspective on life had shifted. And then there were the dreams. Every night, Ithra appeared in his dreams, sometimes standing in the distance, watching him with those intense violet eyes, other times right beside him, speaking in that calm, calculated voice. The dreams felt so real, so vivid, that he could hardly tell if they were just his imagination running wild or if there was something more to them. It wasn't just her presence that haunted him, though. It was the choices she had spoken of, the choices that would define the future, not just of humanity, but of the galaxy itself. Lennox had always considered himself an ordinary man, an engineer who had worked his way into the diplomatic corps. He didn't believe in grand destinies or cosmic forces, but Ithra had made him question that belief. She had spoken about humanity as if they were at a crossroads, as if their decisions, their actions, could alter the very fabric of the universe. It wasn't long before Lennox found himself seeking out Ithra once more. He wasn't sure what he was looking for. Answers, maybe, or just a chance to understand what had been weighing on him. Whatever it was, he felt a pull toward her, one that he couldn't ignore. He found her in the council chambers, a large open room filled with long tables where representatives from various species gathered. The windows were enormous, offering a breathtaking view of the stars beyond. Ithra stood at the far side of the room speaking with a few other dignitaries, but as soon as she saw him, her eyes locked onto his. Without a word, she excused herself from the group and walked toward him. "Lennox," she greeted him, her voice as calm and collected as always. "I was wondering when you would come." He wasn't sure how to respond to that. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about the choices, the future." Ithra's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. "I thought you might. Tell me, what have you decided?" He hadn't fully formed his thoughts, but he felt the weight of her question pressing on him. "I'm not sure."
You said humanity could change the galaxy, but I don't know how we're supposed to do that.
We've made so many mistakes. We're not perfect.
Ithra studied him for a moment, as if weighing his words. "Perfection is not required," she said. "It's about direction, not destination. Your species has made mistakes, yes, but every species does. The key is learning from those mistakes and using that knowledge to move forward. That is how change happens." Lennox nodded slowly. He had always known that humans weren't perfect. Maybe he wasn't meant to have all the answers right now. Maybe it wasn't about having all the pieces of the puzzle, but about being willing to start putting them together. He nodded slowly, his resolve hardening. "I want to be part of that change. I want to help." Ithra's smile grew wider. "I knew you would, and you will." But remember, Lennox, this is not something you can do alone. You will need others by your side. You will need to inspire them, to lead them. And you must trust that they will follow you. Lennox felt a twinge of fear at the thought of leading others. He had always been more comfortable behind the scenes, fixing things, solving problems. But as he looked into Ithra's eyes, he realized that she believed in him, perhaps more than he believed in himself, and that gave him the courage to take the next step. "I'll try," he said, his voice steady now. "That's all anyone can ask," Ithra replied softly. "And remember, change doesn't happen in a single moment. It's a series of decisions, each one building upon the last." Lennox stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of her words sink in. The path ahead was still unclear, but he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't turn back now. He had made the choice to move forward, and he wasn't going to stop. As Ithra turned to leave, she paused for a moment and looked back at him. "You will do well, Lennox. But remember, the hardest part is not taking the first step. It's continuing to walk, even when the way is unclear." Lennox watched her disappear into the crowd, a sense of purpose filling him. He didn't know exactly what the future held, but for the first time he felt ready to face it. The galaxy was vast, filled with challenges and opportunities, and he was no longer just an observer. He was a part of something much larger than himself. The future was uncertain, yes, but it was his to shape.